I'm ready to go. Oh, hello, everybody. Welcome to what I am determined will be the last night of the fall 2022 special town meeting. It is December 8th. I am Kate Poverman, the moderator. We will be having one special guest appearance by Assistant Moderator John Karen later on today. At the end of the evening, I will be reading corrected votes for those of you who had technical difficulties logging your votes, and there's always something that goes wrong. So that will be the highlight of the evening for some, I am sure. But for others, it might be the discussion of Article 37, to which we will turn now. Article 37, the main motion, is to be found on Supplement 2, page 1 through 2 on the Night 7 supplements. We have a language change on the first page of it to change the language which says to see if the town will adopt the following resolution, and change it to voted that the town adopt the following resolution. Article 37 asks the AC in consultation with the school committee to develop a proposal for hiring an independent consultant to do a budget review. And it is moved by Lee Selwyn, seconded by Mr. Gordon. And we will start off with the petitioners. Lee Selwyn, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Lee Selwyn, town meeting member, precinct 13, and I'm also a member of the advisory committee. The motivation for this warrant article was that over the past 7 or 8 years, the advisory committee has noticed that town departments were finding themselves with a progressively smaller share of the total town budget. And at the same time, the school department's budget was increasing. And I decided over the summer to take a deep look at the history of the town and school budgets over the past decade. And I developed some relationships I'd like to share with you briefly, and then talk about what Article 37 is going to accomplish, or is intended to accomplish. This first graph is starts out, it's an indexed graph because we're dealing with 2 different commodities. So we started 100% in 2015, and the blue bars represent the total the total school department budget, and the green bars represent school enrollment. And if you see in the early years, school enrollment was going up, but as time went on, it began to drop off while the school budget continued to increase, and the disparity between the growth rates is quite pronounced. Next slide, please. This is the overall, we're looking here at the overall school budget over this period, and it just highlighting the growth that has occurred in absolute terms. Next slide. Here I'm comparing the school budget to the town budget over this 2015 to 2023 period, and what is being shown here is that the school budget is rising at a much faster rate. I received some criticism for this graph because it was pointed out that both of these figures include debt service, and the suggestion was made that if I excluded debt service growth from the school budget, because we have all those capital projects and buildings and debt exclusion votes by the electorate, that would eliminate most of the school department growth. So I decided to do that. Can I have the next slide? And what I did on this slide was simply separate out the debt service from the operating amounts. And sure enough, it's pretty much we're still seeing very substantial growth. Next slide. This is a comparison in percentage terms of the portion of the budget of the town side and the school side, showing that the town side is dropping off. And I took a look at several specific town departments in particular. Next slide, please. This is the budget for the public safety departments, which is police and fire, showing a steady decline. Next slide. This is the libraries, similarly a steady decline. And then finally, the last slide I have, next slide please, is the health department, which is showing a steady decline except for the COVID years when there was a small bump up. And then as soon as we got back into the current budget year, we're sort of back to the longer term trend. That's all the slides. If you want to give me back the, people can see me, although I'm not sure I want them to see me because they're going to throw rocks at me, but that's beside the point. What are we trying to accomplish in this warrant article? Let me tell you what we're not trying to accomplish. We're not proposing any allocation for a consultant at this time. We're proposing simply that the advisory committee undertake to develop a scope of a budget review. And the purpose of this is to permit the advisory committee to evaluate priorities of town departments and those of the school department on the same basis. Right now, departments set their own priorities and determine what their budget should be. And when they do that, some of the items are a higher priority and some are lower. And there is a possibility that school department priorities at the lower end may be at a lower level than priorities that are being unmet on the town side. What we're trying to do is get a handle on this. And that's it. This is a constructive approach to good government. And it's unfortunate that people have tried to read adversarial motives into this, but that's all we're trying to do. There's no intention to cut the school budget. There's no intention to eliminate Metco. I've been reading the listserv. There's a lot of disinformation about what our objectives are. I think our objectives are not adversarial. We've put in an amended language to make that clear, and I hope you'll support it. And Jocelyn Murphy, who joined me in developing this article, will talk now about what the AC's role is in the budgeting process.
Thank you. Ms. Murphy, you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good evening. Jocelyn Murphy, town meeting member from Precinct 16 and member of the advisory committee, speaking for myself. I have a long history with the public schools of Brookline, which began when I was a student in Miss White's first grade class at the Runkle School. When I graduated from Brookline High School, I had no idea I would return one day to represent the school department as a member of the town's legal department. Through these years, I've been inside the PSB's wheelhouse, and I've had the privilege of meeting many wonderful Brookline educators, including the fantastic Francesca Stark, whose students in the Keep Club at Driscoll produced the wonderful video you saw in support of Warrant Article 10. We are so fortunate to have such fantastic educators in Brookline. Despite what you may have heard, Warrant Article 37 is not intended to be critical of the school department. It does not seek to defund the department, and it does not propose to cut the immensely valuable Metco and materials sheet programs, as some have claimed. Instead, it proposes that we undertake a process for understanding how and on what criteria the school department's budget is established, how it fits in with other departmental budgets, and whether certain policies that are in place still make sense decades after their creation. Some of the questions that have come up in my mind are whether school furniture should be replaced on a random schedule or only when replacements are actually needed. Could the school department consider using in-house counsel for collective bargaining instead of outside counsel, as the town now does? Why has the school department's operating budget increased at a rate that is nearly double that of all other town departments since 2015? Is the town-school partnership agreement still reasonable and smart in today's fiscal environment? The advisory committee, referred to in other communities as the finance committee, is empowered under state and local law to advise town meeting on financial matters. And this body, town meeting, is the sole authority that is empowered to approve the appropriation for support of Brookline schools. How can we possibly do this job effectively and responsibly if we're unable to fully understand or even appreciate the moving parts that churn the engines that run the school department? The advisory committee is well suited for the tasks that are called for under Article 37. Its members are a remarkable group of smart and dedicated residents who bring a diversity of perspectives and expertise to the table. In consultation with the school committee, as is proposed, the advisory committee is particularly qualified to do this work. Article 37 is a resolution that simply asks you, as the appropriating body, to agree that the school department could use an outside look at its budget practices to better inform all of us. Favorable action on this article will only get this proposal started. In May, you will have the opportunity to accept or reject the budget that is proposed under the article to support a review that is intended to support all of the town's departments. I respectfully request that you vote favorable action on the article as amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Mr. Perlman and Ms. Nobrega, who have a combined 9 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. David Perlman, Town Meeting Member Precinct 15 and Chair of the School Committee. I speak to you tonight on behalf of a unanimous school committee recommending no action on Warrant Article 37 and no action on the amended version of Warrant Article 37. Next slide. Warrant Article 37 seeks an unfunded appropriation of up to $500,000, according to an advisory committee report, to hire a private consultant to analyze the school budget at the sole direction of the advisory committee. In making this proposal, the petitioners create an alarmist picture of a school supposedly out of control compared to other town departments and municipalities. However, the data presented by the petitioners is heavily inflated and skewed. It conflates non-operating costs, such as debt service on new school buildings, with annual operating costs. These school projects were overwhelmingly approved by the voters of this town via debt exclusion ballot questions. They were approved to address unprecedented enrollment growth exceeding 29%, a total of 1,692 students between 2004 and 2018. That is the equivalent of 3 K-8 schools. These exclusions had absolutely nothing to do with the annual year-to-year operational budget allocations that town meeting approves. The actual school operational budgets from FY15 to the present, the same 8-year period of time that the petitioners selected for their analysis, had an average annual growth rate of 4.76% per year. Over the last 5 years, the average annual growth rate was only 3.63%, over a point less. It is important to note that the positive growth outlier from FY15 was the result of another townwide vote, when Brookline voters supported an override to provide additional funds for both the schools and the town departments, something they repeated in 2018. There is nothing particularly alarming taking place with the direction of spending in the school budget. As a percentage of both the town department budgets and as a percentage of the overall town budget, allocations to the schools have been very stable, ranging between 56 and 61% of the town department's budget and 38% to just under 42% of the overall town budget. Next slide. The public schools of Brookline directly receives a percentage of town department budgets that is comparable to that of other area school systems, if not on the low side. Looking at FY23, approximately 60% of our town department budgets is allocated to the schools. For Needham, Newton, and Wellesley, that number is between 64% and 67%. For Lexington, it's 75%. To the extent that there are questions about the school operating budget and particular spending decisions, we do not need to spend up to $500,000 that we do not currently have to farm out what is the responsibility of our elected officials and town staff to review and scrutinize. We have the Town School Partnership Committee. We have the Advisory Committee. We have the Advisory Committee Schools Subcommittee. In addition, the school committee and its finance subcommittee help prepare an annual budget book that lays out in painstaking detail various line item expenditures by category, program, and/or school building, accompanied by contextual narratives and illustrative data points. Last year's budget book was 147 pages long. Another available resource is OpenGov, a dynamic, publicly accessible online database that tracks school spending in real time. If after all of these opportunities to gain insight into the school budget process, there are still fundamental disagreements regarding priorities or analysis, nothing in our existing structure prevents a town meeting member from proposing an alternative top-line number allocation change. We do not need to spend up to $500,000 on a private consultant for what is fundamentally a political question: how to allocate funds between departments in a manner that reflects our collective values. Values. Education is not an area where we can evaluate expenditures solely on a quantitative basis. Children are human beings, not widgets. Programs like material fees allow us to attract and retain high-quality school and town staff. However, even to the extent that we can look at education through a quantitative lens, there are complex cost savings calculations that do not show up neatly on a financial report, though we are striving to explain them better to the community. Upfront investments can have downstream cost savings. For example, smaller classroom sizes allow greater attention to individual students by the teacher, thereby reducing more costly specialist interventions. The school committee regularly performs program reviews, not only for pedagogical and social emotional purposes, but also to achieve greater financial efficiencies where practicable. Recent reviews include our math program, English language learners, middle school, early literacy, food services, facilities use, and special education. As Superintendent Guillory methodically works through a strategic plan for the district, additional changes will be made with financial sustainability among the district's priorities. He's only in his second year in Brookline. Let's give him the opportunity to further develop and implement his strategic plan with the entire community without creating additional work, diverting focus, and incurring the expense of a private outside consultant acting at the direction of an operationally removed advisory committee. At the direction of the advisory committee, the school committee voted to approve all but one of BFAC's recommendations, including those that urge better integration with the town. The school committee wants to collaborate and are actively doing so already in multiple venues. We appreciate the slight movement in that direction offered by the proposed amendment to Warrant Article 37, but the language does not embrace collaboration along the lines of BFAC suggestions or what already exists at Town School Partnership, where a committee of diverse stakeholders offers experiential expertise on equal footing. The amended language of developing an RFP, quote, in consultation with the school committee, close quote, is vague and malleable. It could mean as little as have a conversation that could be disregarded. As such, the school committee unanimously recommends no action on both Warrant Article 37 and no action on the amended Warrant Article 37. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Nobrega.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good evening, Mariah Nobrega, joining you from Brazil and apologizing in advance for any issues with my audio. Since 2021, I have been finance chair of the school committee, and from 2015 to 2020 was a member of advisory. When I served on advisory, specifically on the school subcommittee, I also wanted better information about the PSB budget. Now, in my role as finance chair, I have the ability to move the needle and have been extremely active with the full support of the entire school committee in working with staff to increase transparency and information sharing for better decision-making. Our excellent superintendent, Dr. Linus Guillory, is equally committed to transparency and communication. As one example, under his leadership last year, we had our first true budget book in years. Beyond the budget book, to prepare for our three separate presentations to advisory, we requested their questions be sent in advance so that we could be sure to have answers prepared, and we presented those questions and answers one by one. In short, we have worked and will continue to work hard on accurate and detailed information sharing, again, for improved decision-making. I'm extremely excited to report that at our most recent finance subcommittee meeting, we reviewed the outline for the FY24 budget book, which will provide even greater budget detail, again, for improved decision-making and information sharing. I'm grateful to Dr. Guillory for continuing to push full steam ahead with this work, particularly given there is presently no full-time deputy superintendent for finance. So given these ongoing efforts, when I received a copy of Warrant Article 37 after it was filed, I was surprised because the petitioner never reached out to discuss the warrant article or ensure the information presented is accurate. And certainly several assertions are not, including those about wild growth in spending. On that, I would remind you that earlier today, David Perlman sent you a document that I prepared, which corrects the facts, some of which David also just discussed. Another inaccuracy is the assertion that staff has not been reduced following the pandemic enrollment drop, when in fact it has been reduced significantly and proportionately. So I was surprised and I was disappointed too, because in my nearly 3 years on school committee, the lead petitioner to my knowledge has never attended a single finance subcommittee meeting at which information is reviewed in minute detail, nor apparently taken advantage of the opportunities for advisory to submit questions to be answered, nor apparently was listening when the question about staffing reductions was asked and answered at advisory last spring. Just to reiterate, the warrant article distorts the data, and there are multiple venues at which information is shared in great detail and questions are answered. So an expensive outside consultant isn't needed to provide this information. Please understand that I'm entirely committed to identifying efficiencies to ensure that we are maximizing education delivery. As David mentioned, PSB does program reviews routinely. And in fact, long before this warrant article, Dr. Guillory and I had already discussed a similar efficiencies review, and he's currently seeking candidates for an evaluation to be completed sooner by a subject matter expert within PSB existing resources and at a tiny fraction of the $500,000 that the lead petitioner has estimated this warrant article could cost. And I will repeat here that what I've said to advisory members previously, PSB would welcome their input into the structure of this evaluation to ensure it's broadly valuable. To conclude, in Brookline's resource-constrained environment, I am loath to imagine $500,000 being spent to duplicate effort when we have an excellent superintendent and a committed school committee that are actively working on efficiency and transparency. Please vote no action on the amended main motion so that PSB may continue to do the work we have initiated without further distractions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nebrega. Ms. Florio, you will have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm Catherine Florio, Town Meeting Member for Precinct 10, speaking for the Advisory Committee, which by a vote of 19 in favor, 5 opposed, urges favorable action on warrant Article 37 as amended, asking Town Meeting to ask the Advisory Committee to develop a scope of work for a review of the school department budget by an outside consultant. There are 3 points I'd like to make at the beginning of this report. This warrant article asks for no funds at this time. Despite what has been said by many, Metco is not a target, and there was no interest in excluding the school committee in this process. This is a warrant article that is asking Town Meeting to ask the Advisory Committee, acting in its capacity as the town's finance committee, to develop a detailed scope of a budget review of the school department to be undertaken potentially by an outside consultant with oversight by the Advisory Committee, and that in doing so, the Advisory Committee shall develop a scope of work for the consultant, prepare and submit to Town Meeting a proposed budget for the school department budget review. This scope and budget would be presented to Town Meeting in May of 2023 for inclusion in the fiscal year 24 budget. Then upon approval of Town Meeting in May 2023, the Advisory Committee will prepare an RFP for the school department budget review, and based on responses to the RFP, possibly select a consultant for this assignment, and then oversee the budget review with the objective of applying the school's recommendations, the consultant's recommendations, in time for the development of the fiscal year 25 school department budget. The Advisory Committee is the appropriate body for this work to be done based on 1, Massachusetts General Ledger, Chapter 39, Section 16, which says, every town whose valuation for the purpose of apportioning the state tax that exceeds $1 million shall, and any other town may, by bylaw, provide for the election or the appointment and duties of appropriation, advisory or finance committees who shall consider any or all municipal questions for the purpose of making reports or recommendations to the town. And it says that in every town having a committee appointed under the authority of this section, it says this committee shall submit a budget at the annual town meeting. And Article 2.2, Section 2.25 of the town's general bylaws states that the Advisory Committee shall submit a budget at the town meeting. It may examine the books and records of any board, committee, or officer of the town so far permitted by law. The discussion. There was essentially unanimous agreement at both the subcommittee hearing and the full AC meeting that the warrant article represents a management best practice. The Brookline Fiscal Advisory Committee specifically recommended periodic management reviews for the town and the schools. Because of the broad support for this warrant article within the Advisory Committee, most of the discussion was focused on how the process should be managed. Share oversight with the schools. Those supporting this direction believe this was an opportunity for the advisory committee and the school committee to work together to develop the scope of work. They argued that a study that included the input of both the AC and the public schools would be the strongest, each bringing their own perspective. An advisory committee controlled process. The advisory committee has legal responsibility for the budget and the authority to examine the books and records of boards, committees, and officers. If the advisory committee developed the scope of work with the intention to retain and manage the consultant, this would ensure that the study would be independent and objective. This is the intention. Overall, there was strong support for the advisory committee to be the body developing the scope of work and retaining the consultant. Tonight, the advisory committee met to discuss an amendment to this warrant article to invite the school committee or its designate to join the advisory committee in this process. This amendment passed with a vote of 22 to 0. 22 in favor, 4 opposed, and no abstentions. The following points were made. METCO is not a target. There is no interest in excluding the school committee. Cooperation goes 2 ways, and we have a history of giving over an additional $1.5 million for school operating leases that are outside the town school partnership. The advisory committee concluded the discussion with a vote showing overwhelming support for this warrant article as amended by a vote of 19 in favor, 5 opposed. The advisory committee urges you to vote favorable action on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sandman, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mike Sandman, Select Board Member and former Chair of the Advisory Committee, speaking for a unanimous Select Board recommending no action on Article 37 as amended. In their explanation for Article 37, the petitioners claim that the schools have, quote, a voracious appetite for money. We've been sweet-talked tonight about how advisory will collaborate with the school committee, but voracious appetite is what's in the explanation of the article. The advisory committee report estimates it would cost $200,000 to $500,000 for a consultant to prescribe a diet for that appetite. The schools are indeed hungry, but they're already dieting. From about 2009 to 2019, the school's budget did increase faster than the town's because enrollment was increasing by about 150 children a year. Do the math. That means an additional $2.25 million a year using a cost of about $15,000 a child. The cumulative addition by 2019 was almost $25 million, and that's before teacher salary increases. Many of you have children in public school, and you've seen that as part of the school's diet, class sizes increased, musical instrument education was cut, fees for athletics were increased, school supply budgets were cut. The 2015 and 2018 overrides helped, but the schools also had to spend money carving new classrooms out of libraries and auditoriums. With COVID, enrollment dropped sharply, although COVID brought its own new costs. Still, when enrollment drops, you'd assume that the staff should be reduced. The last people hired are the first ones fired, and if the schools had cut too aggressively, they would have lost the progress they'd made in increasing staff diversity. But now they have cut back, and staff is now down to 92% of 2019's level, in line with the decrease in enrollment. You'll hear references tonight to the town school partnership. It advises the town administrator and school superintendent on the allocation of funds between the town and school budgets. That committee has 2 members each from the advisory committee, school committee, and select board, and it's not a rubber stamp. We've sent the schools initial requests in the last 2 budget cycles back for more trimming, and trim they did. And there's been a more strategic response, as you've heard. Superintendent Guillory has started a year-long strategic planning process. It's 2/3 complete. He's hired a consultant, a former head of school finance in another town. To drop an outside consultant or the advisory committee into the middle of that work will delay it and divert the attention of an already shorthanded staff. And for what? I respect the advisory committee, but to some extent, Article 37 reflects unhappiness on the part of a few people with the cost of both METCO and with the program that allows Brookline employees to send their kids to our schools, a major advantage in recruitment and retention. We don't need anyone to tell us that those programs cost money, but deciding whether to continue those programs is not the role of the advisory committee. Don't be sweet-talked. Read the petitioner's explanation and the advisory committee report. Voracious appetite. $200,000 to $500,000 consultant. They mentioned Metco as a target at the advisory committee. It's on the meeting video. They've hoodwinked advisory committee members. Don't let them hoodwink you. The superintendent understands the fiscal realities we face. Let's step back and let him do his job. A unanimous select board asks you to vote no action on Article 37.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, you are up now. Neil Gordon, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Neil Gordon, Precinct 1 Town Meeting Member and a member of the Advisory Committee. Weeks ago, there was an announcement that the library would be cutting back the hours of part-time employees. That caused Town Meeting Member Marissa Vogt to address the Select Board during its public comment period. We all love the library, and so apparently does Marissa, who made this important point. The library budget, as a percentage of the town's budget overall, has been declining. Listening to Marissa's comment in real time, I thought, sure, and virtually every other department except the school department. As departmental budgets on the town side have been squeezed in favor of the schools, one thing we've seen is this. More and more town meeting members are bypassing the budget process and coming directly to town meeting for money. We've had an out of balance budget since May because we thought that sidewalk improvements were important. We had a warrant article filed that asked for money for rat control. We've seen similar requests, sometimes just days before town meeting, seeking money for affordable housing, for advancing racial equity, for community engagement against domestic violence, and for planning and economic development. All of these righteous, all expensive, and all beyond the town's ability to adequately fund, and all, as I said, bypassing the town's budget process. Our town administrator said this in a November 10th memo, quote, I understand that these rogue appropriations are often submitted out of a sense of desperation, with petitioners feeling as though their priorities are not being heard by the town, unquote. Our budget process is unraveling, and in that context, Article 37 calls for an important study consistent with the advisory committee's charge as articulated in our bylaws. Section 2.2.5, which requires the town administrator and the superintendent in schools, without even hinting at school committee involvement, to submit their appropriation requests to the advisory committee, gives the advisory committee the authority to examine books and records, and requires the advisory committee to submit a budget at our annual town meeting. It's not adversarial, it's not confrontational, and it's not uncooperative. It's the advisory committee's statutory job. Please vote favorable action on Article 37. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pollock, you have 3 minutes.
David Pollock, Precinct 11, Advisory Committee member, also Chair of the Moderators Committee on BFAC, speaking for myself and against warrant Article 37. I chaired the school committee and served on its finance subcommittee, working closely with both the 2015 and 2018 override study committees. Each time we had to develop 2 budgets and pink slip scores of teachers in advance of that override ballot. There are many reasons to vote against this costly study, including its questionable timing. The superintendent currently is working on a strategic plan. The department is between deputy superintendents for administration and finance, so not a great time for a major invasive audit. And the town is staring down an operating override in early May, so funding this in late May is a little bit like closing the barn door after the cow is gone. Budgeting is a year-round undertaking, starting in the summer and is far along by the time the town produces its preliminary revenue forecasts. A year ago, that revenue forecast and allocation to the schools left a $7 million gap. Why? Because the FY22 budget had been level funded due to COVID, and it was 5 years year 5 of an override cycle that had been projected to only be sufficient for 3 years. Despite these challenges, the schools made the allocation they were given on day 1 work. They did it through a combination of deep cuts and finding other sources of funding. Yes, this included significant one-time funds, but it also included a workforce reduction of 9% measured against an enrollment reduction of only 8%. The advisory committee gets the same access to the school department budget, the same detail as it gets for every department. The AC has a special subcommittee just for the schools, and the schools have a deputy superintendent just for finance who meets with advisory. There were 3 meetings last spring between the AC and the schools on budget issues. Arguably, the AC has more access and spends more time on schools than any other departmental budget. As well, it should, because the school department is extremely complex. The difference isn't access to information. It's that complexity, state and federal mandates, the fact that children are each unique individuals, and families can't be moved every year to optimize classroom size and teacher count. Town School Partnership has 6 members, 2 from the Select Board, 2 from the AC, and 2 from the School Committee. It was designed to provide a collaborative planning framework between our leaders and has a 4-2 townside advantage. Framed as it is, this request is irregular and out of order. Indeed, if the whole of Town School Partnership were making this request today, I would view it very differently. Finally, our schools are governed through an electoral process, and we collectively choose 3 new representatives to do this work every year. If we're dissatisfied with the job that they're doing, we should elect others with different values and priorities that better suit us. Please vote no on warrant Article 37.
Thank you. Mr. Spritz. Please unmute, Mr. Spritz.
Is that better?
That's better.
I'm Nathan Spritz. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 16 and a former member of BFAC. This is a higher level and longer term view than what some of the other people who I respect very deeply have shared so far. We held many discussions during our BFAC meetings lamenting the state of our financial management capabilities in Brookline. The function is under-resourced on both sides. What should happen in a general sense on both the schools and town side of the TSP is this. The community and the department leaders should determine what services we want. Professionals in the department should work out the costs. All the departments huddle together to work out townwide priorities. And maybe we get into a scrum. Maybe we have to get into a scrum over which priorities are funded. Advisory, the select board, school committee, and ultimately TM then has its say. Then finally, the departments aggressively manage their budget allocations, money that comes from the residents and local businesses to deliver on agreed goals and service standards. And then the necessary but often missed bonus step, they come back to us and tell us how well they did. Our schools have priorities, but lately they've been pretty small bore, the new priorities. I know this because although the rhetoric may be lofty, the budget requests for new student-facing positions, almost 90% of the school budget is on salaries, is always small. And then there's the annual scramble to get to the end of the year without going over the available funding. And this rush to cut or delay costs is a process they go through all too routinely. This is the biggest budget item that we approve, the schools. It's about $140 million, and we have to do better than this. I suspect the problem is twofold, but an outside consultant should figure it out, not me. The questions I would like answered are, does the town school partnership process limit the school's ambitions too much? And could we do better if they didn't have to fit their costs within an old creaky revenue calculation? Would they be more willing to shift resources and ask for more money if they thought that their community supported priorities would be better funded? Think about this. How can we close the achievement gap without significant additional investment? Do the schools have adequate financial management and oversight? Are we spending our dollars so as to best meet their mission? Are we measuring how successful we are at meeting their mission? Do we need to allocate more money to meet the mission? Can we answer any of these questions? So I support Article 37 because I want answers to these questions and more. I want a better financial control structure so that we have more information about how our money translates into high achievement every year. I want the superintendent to have better information so that he can more confidently ask for more money if needed. Good leaders are stronger leaders with more information. So vote favorable action on Article 37 if you want a better framework to provide better financial information for budgeting and cost control. You want stronger planning process where we consider new priorities along for roll forward costs and are willing to support overrides if we discover that the schools or even the town, if they accept the same lessons, need more money to support their mission. Vote no action if you're afraid of better information and you're afraid that the recognition of the costs that support the way you want to live in your town require overrides. If you're afraid of learning these answers, vote no. I'm voting yes because I want the answers and I'm okay with spending more money to get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Ashkenazi.
Thank you. Miriam Ashkenazi, Select Board Member, speaking on behalf of myself, a parent of 2 children currently enrolled in the Brookline public school system. Warrant Article 37 seeks to ask town meeting to request the advisory committee to develop a scope of work for a budget review of the school department by an outside consultant. The cost of such hired consultant is estimated to be $200,000 to nearly $500,000. The advisory committee is a body of individuals appointed by the moderator. It is not an elected body. Town meeting is seeking to place oversight of the public schools of Brookline budget into the hands of an appointed body, an attempt to wrench control of an elected body and hand it over to an unelected body. To supersede the school committee, an elected body of individuals whose express purpose is to oversee the public schools of Brookline's budget. I hope you followed that. A body elected by the constituents of Brookline that we trust to vote on overrides, marijuana establishments, and debt exclusions. An elected body of individuals that are accountable to the people of Brookline, for which the AC holds no such charge and has no such accountability. We cannot vote out AC members, and the town voting for a moderator is not a green light for the single person to then appoint a body to oversee other elected officials. We can vote out school committee members and select board members and town meeting members for that matter. I would also take this moment to point out that the public schools of Brookline, under the charge of a relatively new and highly experienced superintendent, has already hired an outside consultant to evaluate and work on the budget. They are already working on this because it is his job. And it is the job of the elected school committee to then have oversight of that process. This is in part what they are elected to do. It hardly seems fiscally responsible to then spend another nearly $500,000 on a second consultant. Ironic, perhaps, but not fiscally responsible. I urge you to vote no action on warrant Article 37 and let the elected school committee do what the people of Brookline elected them to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Doggett.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. John Doggett, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 13, member of the Advisory Committee, but speaking for myself. I'm speaking in support of WA 37 and the amendment. We're all aware that there is an ever-increasing pressure on both the town and school finances. Recently, we have seen requests from town meeting to add expenditure requests, all for good reasons. For the next school budget, there are potential significant line item increases, and with the elimination of the one-time ESSA funding, pressure on that 24 budget will be increased, potentially contributing to further decreases in town budget allocations. In addition, after years of low inflation, we're now entering an era of much higher inflation and higher borrowing costs, which will only add stress to our already limited budget increases. The allocation of resources across different town silos is a delicate task. Of course, we don't want to have to make those difficult choices, but the hard reality is the amount of increased revenue available each year is largely fixed, and we are required by law to have a balanced budget. So how does warrant Article 37 help? Now is the time, I believe, to start a public conversation about meshing town and school priorities. Warrant Article 37 forms the basis for that conversation. Warrant Article 37 asks for your support to enable the advisory committee, with the assistance of the school committee, to develop a scope of work for a bid for an outside consultant to provide information, knowledge, and tools that will help evaluate and prioritize the needs of the school and of those town departments. This work would serve as a framework for discussions of future resource allocations. By providing a comprehensive analysis of the school budgeting process, how priorities are set and adjusted, as well as identifying personal synergies, the goal is to enable the town to maintain school excellence without compromising town excellence. However, this alone does not solve the problem. Be cautioned, it is necessary but not sufficient. A forum in which to discuss the priorities and resource allocation, such as a quarterly town school budget summit suggested by BFAC, is also needed. It's important to note at this time, town meeting is not being asked to approve or allocate funding for a consultant, only to initiate a collaborative development with the school committee of the scope of work for a bid to select a possible candidate. In May next year, Warrant Article 37 contemplates the town meeting will consider the issuance of such a bid, describing the goals and scope of the project with the allocation of the appropriate funding. A vote cast for Warrant Article 37 is a vote to start the conversation on joint town and school priorities. A vote cast for Warrant Article 37 is a vote for increased knowledge, understanding, and transparency. A vote cast for Warrant Article 37 is a vote for wider participation in resource allocation debate. Please vote favorable action on the amendment and on the main motion. Thank you.
Thank you. There's been a motion to call the question, which will not be granted. I would caution patience. Okay, Mr. Green.
Wow, that was quicker than I thought it would be. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm Bernard Green, a member of the Select Board, but I'm speaking for myself on Warrant Article 37. A little roadmap first. I want to start with some of the reasons I believe the schools are unique and can't always be discussed in the same way we discuss the town budget. Then I want to suggest what we should be doing instead of Warrant Article 31. And finally, I want to make some observations on why, in my view, Warrant Article 31 may have been submitted. First, I want to make a disclosure, not of a conflict of interest, I don't have any, but of a bias. I was once a member of a board of education in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. And although school boards are independent municipal corporations in Ohio with their own taxing authority and budgets, the underlying issues raised by Warrant Article 37 are similar. Those issues are, in my view, those that relate to the importance and unique role of local school governing bodies under state and federal law and tradition. They have a certain amount of independence from some of the budget priorities of their cities or towns because their role is separate from their city or town, and they are subject to separate state and federal regulations. Those regulations impose priorities that are not imposed on cities and towns related to the protection of children and to providing equal educational opportunities to children with disabilities from low-income families or girls who are mandated to have the same sport and other opportunities of boys. In Massachusetts, many suburban school districts like Brookline have also accepted a moral obligation to prioritize the mitigation of the damage done by racial segregation in underfunded inner city schools in Boston by participating in the not perfect METCO program. Also explicit in some of the regulations is the priority to educate the children of the community and to produce an educated workforce, which is a national and national defense priority, in fact. None of these priorities write the schools a blank check. This concern of a blank check is a valid and implicit concern of Warrant Article 37. But Massachusetts state law does limit town meetings' power the appropriating body, to approving only the total budget without getting into the line item details of that budget, and where the school committee's priorities are budgeted. We don't need warrant Article 37 to accomplish the legitimate goals of the advisory committee in warrant Article 37, which the petitioner all but admitted at the select board meeting earlier this evening. We have the structures in place in Brookline to do all that the warrant article wants done. The advisory committee has extensive authority, not extensive, but has authority to investigate the books of the school department currently, and it does so through the school subcommittee, through the advisory committee's schools subcommittee, which can and does talk to the appropriate school department staff. If it finds something amiss or does not get cooperation from the schools, the advisory committee can take that up with the town school partnership or talk directly to the superintendent or town administrator. If that doesn't work to get their attention, it can propose a budget to town meeting for approval that is lower in total amount than what the school committee wants. Or it can let the school committee know about its concerns with specific budget items by making non-binding monetary recommendations on certain items.
Could you please finish up, Mr. Green?
Yes. Okay, finally, warrant Article 37 is not issued for no reason. The schools have an historical reputation of being opaque and non-cooperative, although this has improved with the more stable leadership we have with Dr. Guillory. But that history may be a reason for a warrant article like warrant Article 31, and with the Pierce debt exclusion coming up, the school committee would be well advised to work with the advisory committee and other existing town structures to address their concerns, including working with the town administrator or the moderator to address some of the structural and staffing impediments to their getting the information they need. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to take some of the people who have lined up to ask questions. Vina Priestley.
Hi, my name is Vina Priestley from Precinct 4. I had 3 kind of questions. In the graph,
Why don't you pick one to start with?
Okay.
And then stick with that.
okay, they're all related to the same. Okay, so towards the finances that we saw in the graphs, how much of that was
Which graphs are you talking about?
apologize in regards to the first speaker that we saw. He was showing us the graphs of children enrollment versus the finances that have been increasing. How much of that was scholarships for BEEP?
I'm sorry, but you cannot ask specific questions as to allocations. This is solely a question as to whether or not a consultant should be hired. I sent around an email relating to that. So to the extent you have any particular question about allocations, that is not relevant. So do you
Okay.
have any more general questions?
No, they were just about financial aid towards children of poverty. That's it. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Valerie Frias.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Valerie Frias, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 13, School Committee Member and Chair. Can you hear me now? Valerie Frias, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 13, School Committee Member and Chair of the School Committee's Subcommittee on Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. I had a question for Petitioner Murphy.
Actually,
Ms.
you can
Murphy-
ask your question and I will decide to whom.
Okay, but it's
who it will
something
be
she
directed to.
stated. It was her statement, Madam Moderator. She stated, and I wrote it down, school programs that are still in place decades after their creation were to be subject to this particular audit. Can you please give me an
I'm sorry,
example of
I did not hear you.
school
and again-
programs that are still in place decades after their creation? I would like an example of a program that is still in place decades after its existence that should be examined under this warrant article.
Okay, again, that is a specific allocation issue.
It is not, Madam Moderator. It is a values question. And again, we've been talking about Metco, we've been talking about materials fees. I would like to know whether the petitioner means Metco.
people, Miss Jocelyn clearly stated already she did not mean Metco. So I will go to the next questioner, Lisa Schatz.
Hello, Lisa Schatz, Town Meeting Member Precinct 11. A question to the petitioners. Why do you think an outside consultant is much more qualified to evaluate the budget of the school rather than the leadership of our schools themselves, like the school committee superintendent and such? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Selman, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, thank you. I think the issue basically, and as I've stated on multiple occasions and again tonight, the issue relates to prioritization. Every department head, whether we're talking about schools or police or fire or libraries or public works, has a set of priorities. And they're going to look at priorities within the four walls of their department and rank them and decide what are the most important and what are the least important. And within the budget constraints in which they operate, they'll come in with a budget proposal. But if we try to take a comprehensive look at the town and across all departments, we might find a situation, and I believe we will find situations, where one department has a relatively low priority item that is not excluded from their budget, and even though that may be lower than a higher priority item of another department. So if for example, we can't really rely on any one department for an internal analysis of that type of issue, because we need to look at the budgetary process in the context of the entire town. And I've used the example of school furniture as a simple case where the superintendent told us last year, told the advisory committee last year, that they replace 10% of the school furniture every year, as opposed to, for example, replacing furniture when it's beginning to show wear to the point where it has to be replaced. That to me would be a relatively low priority item, and yet it may take precedence over higher priority items of other departments. And an outside consultant needs to develop a means for evaluating how departments prioritize, how town meeting, and with the assistance of the advisory committee. And remember, it's town meeting that ultimately makes these decisions. All advisory does is provide support for that. But how town meeting, with the assistance of the advisory committee, can evaluate these conflicting and competing needs of the various departments and operate within a very small budget constraint, a very severe budget constraint that's dictated by Prop 2.5.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Mr. Weintraub now.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Sorry, yes.
I'm Bob Weintraub, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 9. I have experienced over 20 budget cycles in the Brookline Public Schools, serving as Chief Financial Officer at Brookline High School and also on the Superintendent's Senior Cabinet. I've also been an educational consultant, and I've worked with consultants in Brookline and beyond. Therefore, I know that it takes time and money for a consultant to get to know a community, and sometimes they never really get it. Too often, a consultant's recommendations disappear into an organization's black hole. At Brookline High, I viewed budget preparation as an annual audit. The process is highly collaborative and transparent. At the high school, over 3 intense months, the budget team includes the senior cabinet, the department chairs, the administrative council, the program directors, the parent executive board, the school council, and the whole faculty. Then there is an interactive and collaborative process with the central office and finally the school committee. Many eyes observe the budget process and many voices contribute to its final recommendations. So I was confused when I heard that we would be considering spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in this environment to analyze the school system's budget. There is serious scrutiny, analysis, and oversight today by the people we hire to lead our school system and by our hardworking school committee. And we have a new and talented superintendent who has embarked on our own strategic planning process. Hiring a consultant will take valuable time away from Dr. Guillory's important work. The petitioners are concerned about the growth of the school budget and its impact on other departments. Almost 90% of our school budget is personnel, all governed by contracts. Over the past decade, Brookline High School's student population grew from around 1,800 to around 2,100 today. It's still 2,100 today. That required hiring an additional 15 full-time equivalent staff, over $1 million every year. No other department in town faces that kind of fiscal pressure, not to mention our moral and legal commitment to educate our most disabled young people. A school system must have teachers in every classroom to teach the children well, counselors and social workers to care for our kids' social and emotional needs, and administrators to build a strong and positive organizational culture. School leaders in Brookline come to work every day to know and care for the complex needs of almost 7,000 young people who walk through our schoolhouse doors each day. They come to our public schools or to central office every day, and they do their jobs, and they are accountable to this community. As head of school, Anthony Meyer said to me yesterday, instead of paying a consultant hundreds of thousands of dollars, give that money to the schoolhouses. We know our needs and we can spend it wisely. Please respect and trust our school leaders and hardworking school committee members. Vote no on warrant Article 37. Thank you.
Other motion to call the question, actually, by Mr. Tuckman, seconded by Mr. Sandman. Since we've been discussing this question for an hour, I will allow it to be voted on. Let me tell you who we have waiting in the wings. In favor of the article, we have Carolyn Thal and Susan Granoff. Speaking against the article, we have Barbara Scotto, Mark Levy, and Scott Ananian. People who have questions are Jocelyn Murphy, Aon Wong, Martin Yassin, Susan Helm Daly, Mark Gerber, Danielle Da Silva, Rui Albuquerque, Jonathan Abbott, Jennifer Goldsmith, Kim Smith, and Linda Pelkey. We will now vote on whether or not to close the debate on Article 37.
Yes. 67 no. 6 abstentions.
The motion passes with 168 yes, 67 no, and 6 abstentions. We will now vote on the actual motion. No, they've actually been incorporated. The petitioner adopted the amendment. So we just have one motion to vote on, the main motion, which is a resolution asking the advisory committee in consultation with the school committee to develop a proposal for hiring an independent consultant to perform a budget review for the schools. Okay, 45 seconds.
58 yes, 179 no, 8 abstentions.
The motion fails with 58 yes, 179 no, and 8 abstentions. We will now turn to Article 38. Article 38 is a resolution to declare May Asian American and Pacific Islander Month and to take other steps in recognition of their contributions to the community. It is found on page 38.5 to 38.6 of the combined reports. It is moved by Chi-Chi Wu and seconded by Mr. Shea. Ms. Wu, you will speak first and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Chi-Chi Wu, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. Conflict of interest disclosure. I'm the chair of the steering committee of the Brookline Asian American Family Network, one of the co-sponsors, and one of the organizations that puts on the May AAPI Heritage Celebration. So my 5 minutes, I have a PowerPoint. If tech could pull that up.
Got the PowerPoint? We're working on it. We're getting there.
Okay, this PowerPoint, I'm hoping will be uplifting, positive, a little bit of change of pace, and non-controversial. Okay, I'm hoping. Don't surprise me, y'all. All right. Warrant Article 39 would establish May as Asian American Pacific Islander or AAPI Heritage Month.
38, just to be clear. That doesn't matter. It's Article 38.
Article 38. Gosh, sorry. All right. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background on the API population in Brookline. There are over 12,000 of us in Brookline, which represents about 19% of the population, almost 1 in 5. Now, sometimes you'll see statistics that's like 16 or 17%, depending how you crunch the 2020 census data. I'm going with the UMass Donahue Institute data. We've got lots of folks in our community that are prominent, notable writers, musicians, business people, scientists, academics, and activists. We're incredibly diverse. The biggest groups are Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, but we have residents of Indian, Thai, Vietnamese, Pakistani, Nepali, Cambodian, and other ethnic backgrounds. We're also economically diverse. A lot of people think of the AAPI population as, highly educated doctors and medical researchers, and we do have those. But we have folks that are low and moderate income. 14% of Brookline Housing Authority residents are AAPI, and a surprising 50% of the Brookline Food Pantry clients are also AAPI. So in recognition of our contributions and the prominence, we're the largest racial minority, maybe the largest minority in town, we'd like May to be designated AAPI History Month. Why May? Next slide, please. Well, May is AAPI Heritage Month federally, and it's been celebrated for decades now. Here is our first AAPI and Black Vice President Kamala Harris at a unity event in 2021. Next slide, please. May is also AAPI Heritage Month in Massachusetts. And here's Charlie Baker, 2018, signing the legislation for that. Next slide, please. Now in Brookline, Brookline Asian American Family Network, or BAFN, has celebrated May as AAPI Heritage Month since about 2016. Actually, I think even before then. We have an event every May that serves 2 functions. One, it's the award ceremony for our essay contest. Brookline High School students are eligible to be in the essay contest. And the theme is what it means to be Asian American in Brookline. We give out the awards in May, and we also have a speaker. So in 2018, we had Janet Wu, who's a journalist in Boston. And here are the shiny, happy faces of the essay contest winners. Next slide, please. In 2019, here we are at the Teen Center with Daniel Coe, who ran for Congress and was Marty Walsh's chief of staff, and he spoke. And here we have more happy essay winners. And the woman to the right is Shulan Chang. She's a
prominent retired business person. A lot of you know her, and she organizes and runs the essay contest and the May event. She's absolutely amazing. We couldn't do it without her. Next slide, please. Now, of course, what happened in 2020, 2021, we had to move on to Zoom like everything else. So here's our 2021 celebration on Zoom. You have June Lee as the speaker. He is a Brookline School alumni and ESPN sports writer. And we have two of the young people who won. You may recognize the young lady to the right, Tina Lee. She is the current co-chair of the Asian Pacific American Club. She was an essay winner. She has spoken to you at town meeting, one of the incredible BHS students that speaks in front of this body. To the left, Lillian Bunnell, also a APAC Club co-president and Brookline High School alum. Next slide, please. Now, the warrant article asks the town to celebrate May's AAPI Heritage Month and also the schools. And Baffin has been helping with the schools for the past couple of years to celebrate AAPI Heritage Month by organizing displays in each of the schools. This year, this is the display from Baker School showing prominent AAPI folks for Heritage Month. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry, could you finish up?
Okay, 2021, here are our displays. All of the schools, every elementary school and high school has one. Last slide, please. So finishing up, what the warrant article do is it's a resolution to ask the select board to declare May AAPI Heritage Month here in Brookline, to hold an annual celebration, ensure that there's funding for the celebration. And we're thinking, you know, the same type of funding that the Martin Luther King Day event and Indigenous People Day event also have about $1,000, the schools to celebrate it, and the people of Brookline to join us in celebration. You may be thinking, well, if Baffin already has a celebration, why do you need this warrant article? Well, we want to make it official. We want to make it an official town event. We want the town to be part of it and to own it. And we want you all to join us. We're hoping to have an in-person event this May that Baffin and the Office of Diversity, which provides us with huge support every year for this, and its deputy director, already organizing something fabulous for May. And I hope you will all join us and vote yes on this warrant article. Thank you.
Thank you. You can hold at the same time as the in-person town meeting, but that's just an idea. And I'm joking. Ms. Florio, you are up next.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm Catherine Florio, Town Meeting Member for Precinct 10, speaking for the Advisory Committee, which by a vote of 22-0 with no abstentions, urges favorable action on Warrant Article 38, a resolution regarding the celebration of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. The petitioners have described what is currently being done through Brookline Asian American Family Network to celebrate AAPI Month and what the event will look like if this warrant article passes. I will answer two questions. The first is why May? One, May 7th, 1843 was the day the first Japanese immigrants arrived in the United States. Two, May 10th, 1869 is Golden Spike Day, the day the first transcontinental railroad in the United States was completed with significant contributions by Chinese pioneers. Three, in 1979, Congress proclaimed the week beginning May 4th as Asian Pacific American Heritage Week. Four, in 1992, Federal Law 102-450 was passed, declaring May Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Massachusetts passed similar legislation in 2018. Tonight, town meeting has the opportunity to make Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month an official town celebration. The second question is, why do we celebrate the many different peoples that make up our community? I believe Shulan Chang, a member of the Brookline Asian American Family Network Steering Committee and the organizer of the annual essay contest, and someone who spoke in support of this warrant article at the subcommittee's hearing, said something I'd like you all to hear. Often, we have a feeling that we talk amongst ourselves, and some people may think that that may be enough. However, I think what is important via all the different events whether it be Martin Luther King Day or Indigenous Peoples Day, is we don't hold these events just to hold a celebration or a party. It's to further and foster a better understanding between the different segments of our community and to be able to be happy for others, not only for ourselves, but for others. For these and many other reasons, the Advisory Committee urges you to vote favorable action on warrant Article 38.
Thank you very much. We will now vote on whether or not to pass warrant Article 38, the resolution to declare May Asian American Pacific Islander Month in Brookline. We will now vote, and it will take a majority vote to pass.
Okay. 235 yes, 0 no, 3 abstentions.
I have never seen this. It's a sweep. 235 yes, 0 no, 3 abstentions. The motion passes. We will now go to Article 40, which is a resolution to conduct a feasibility study for the construction of a public outdoor pool in Brookline. It is moved by Ms. Jonas, seconded by Mr. Lebovitz. It is found on page 40, and I'm taking over the spotlight that belongs now to the assistant moderator. So can we take a minute and switch seats? I was so excited.
I'm as ready as I'm gonna be. We back on the air. All right. So we turned to Article 40. Main motion is found on pages 40-14 to 40-19 of the combined reports. It is a resolution seeking to have the town conduct a feasibility study for an outdoor pool, moved by Ms. Jonas, seconded by Mr. Leibovitz. And we'll start with the proponents, Ms. Jonas, Ms. Scanlon, Mr. Leibovitz, who have a combined 12 minutes, however you choose to divvy them up. Ms. Jonas, will we be starting with you tonight?
No, we're starting with Kathleen.
Okay, Ms. Scanlon. Let me stop the stopwatch and we'll and reset it so that you get your full allocation of time here. So
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
absolutely.
Great. We have some slides to put up if Tech can pull those.
PowerPoint of the video.
PowerPoint, please.
Okay, PowerPoint it is.
Great. My name is Kathleen Scanlon, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. Presenting with me tonight is Elisa Jonas, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 16, and Alec Leibovitz, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. And this warrant article asks that the town carries out the long-awaited feasibility study for an outdoor pool for Brookline. So why do we need an outdoor pool for Brookline? An outdoor pool provides a means for all residents of all ages, of all ability levels, and all income levels, a means to do physical fitness in the outdoors. As we know, climate change is increasing the need for a pool as the summer months become hotter and warmer. And adding a bubble would allow year-round usage. Wayland does this and generates net revenue every year. And the pandemic has made clear the need for outdoor fitness opportunities, especially when many of us live in densely built-up areas. Next slide, please. It is critical that all young people learn to swim so as to avoid drowning, which is a leading cause of death in children, and Brookline's current facility lacks the physical capacity to meet the demand, resulting in oversubscribed lessons. Teens would be provided with a safe, healthy option for activities in the summer, and lower income families live in denser areas of Brookline and do not have the resources to necessarily pay for private pool options, vacation homes, or private camps for their children that might provide an opportunity to learn to swim. So an outdoor pool generates net positive income, takes up relatively little space, and is a high demand facility. Next slide. So many of you may be familiar with the Riley Pool in Brighton. And why not just use this pool? Well, this is an old pool with very limited amenities. It does not allow any kind of chairs at the pool. It has no separation of the pool for different uses, such as an area for laps for adults and recreation for children. It has very limited provision to enable young children, the elderly, and the disabled to enter the pool, such as a zero depth entry pool. And there are no facilities for younger children to play. And there is solely concrete surrounding the pool. So the town also, this is the biggest one, cannot provide activities for its residents like swimming lessons, aerobic classes, swim meets, or evening events, etc. Because it's not a community pool for the residents of the town of Brookline, they don't control the programming. And next slide, please. Sorry, can you go back one slide, please? And Elisa or Alec?
Which one would you like, Ms. Jonas or Mr. Leibovitz? Or which one would like to be unmuted? Ms. Jonas, you seem to be talking. Would you like to be unmuted? Can we unmute Ms. Jonas?
Mr. Leibovitz, I don't know where he is.
Oh, okay. Mr. Leibovitz, are you out there?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Leibovitz, let's hear from you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Assistant Moderator. Alec Leibovitz, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. Picking up where Kathleen left off, outdoor swimming and an outdoor swimming facility provide, in addition to being a permanent new outdoor recreational asset that the town would enjoy, the most apparent benefit is the benefit of having an accessible health and fitness resource that's available to all people, regardless of disability status or age in Brookline. And in fact, these benefits are so desirable and great that many municipalities, both here in the Commonwealth and nationwide, have chosen to create and operate public swimming facilities outdoors. Next slide, please. And interestingly, Brookline is uniquely underserved in this area as compared to comparable towns and cities here in the Commonwealth. As you can see in this slide, we are one of only 2 municipalities in Massachusetts with more than 30,000 residents that has no public outdoor swimming facilities at all. We share this distinction with Peabody, and as you can see, many of our peer municipalities not only have 1 outdoor pool, but have multiple outdoor swimming facilities. Again, a testament both to their feasibility in terms of operation and cost, but also to their desirability among residents. Next slide, please. So why does this matter? Why does Brookline being underserved in this area? Why do we care about this? Well, I think there are a couple reasons, but 2 come to mind most prominently. One being residents have repeatedly told us that this is what they want. This has been identified in numerous reports conducted by the town and the Parks and Recreation Department in the last 2 decades. Outdoor swimming remains a high priority for residents, even amidst the many outdoor recreational activities that they express preferences for. In addition, we need an outdoor pool and greater access to swimming resources as a future-looking need as we anticipate the increasing impacts of climate change and what that will do for our town. Summers are getting drier, hotter, and heat emergencies are becoming all too more frequent. Unfortunately, our only cooling resources publicly available at this time in Brookline are splash pads. And as we can see in the slide, the Parks and Open Space Master Plan has not identified options outside of those splash pads for future climate mitigation efforts. We feel an outdoor pool would fit this need quite nicely. Next slide, please. And there are unique benefits that we feel could be realized by an outdoor facility as compared to an indoor facility, such as the aquatic center that currently operates in Brookline. One is consumers seem to prefer swimming outdoors, particularly in the summer months. You can compare some of the attendance numbers that we presented here. For the aquatic center, there were 83,000 visits in 2018, sourced from our population of 64,000. Comparing even to a place like Lexington, a town with roughly half of the population of Brookline, we saw nearly twice as many visits in only a 2-month period to their outdoor public swimming facility as the aquatic center received in the entire same calendar year. Next slide, please. Additionally, and due in part to this renewed interest in outdoor swimming, outdoor pools have been shown to actually generate annual net positive revenue in many comparable municipalities in Massachusetts, making this project not only feasible, but potentially a way in the long term to reduce pressure on our operating budget. Next slide. We presented here a brief itemized breakout of costs and revenues. It occurred at the Belmont Outdoor Swimming Facility in 2022. As you can see, during just the summer of 2022, Belmont's pool realized net revenue of almost $200,000. Next slide. For another example, let's return to the Lexington pool. As you can see here, not only did they achieve net revenue, in this case, close to $80,000, but they would have achieved even more if not for the financial arrangement whereby their outdoor pool actually subsidizes an adjoining reservoir. Again, displaying just the potential feasibility of a project like this. Next slide, please. And this ability to generate revenue gives us several options to explore when considering different operational financial models for such a pool. Wayland, for instance, maintains its pool as a separate nonprofit. The net revenue every year helping to defray the costs of maintenance and the costs associated with installation of a bubble and heating for the winter months. Next slide, please. Another example of more creative models that could be explored comes to us from Roxbury with the DCR pool. This pool facility partners with the Harvard swim team, who use it for their activities, both practice and I believe competitions in the fall and spring, to greatly defray revenue and operational costs. So it's entirely possible we could explore one of these models or even the potential use of a revolving fund in such a future project. And here I'll pass it off to my excellent co-petitioner, Elisa Jonas.
Ms. Jonas.
Yeah, hi, it's Elisa Jonas, town meeting member, precinct 16. The history was mentioned a little bit by Alec, but I want to go into a little more detail. Going all the way back, starting in the early 1900s. Oh, sorry. We need a new PowerPoint slide. Yes. Starting in the early 1900s, communities nationwide began building public outdoor pools. Belmont apparently was the first in 1911. The founder, Henry Underwood, felt that children were not having as many good times as he used to have in his boyhood, as natural swimming holes were being lost to development. Proclaiming at Belmont's town meeting that nobody would be able to drive children off this land as they've been driven off private property. Brookline's leadership at the time chose a different approach, continuing to limit this resource to only those who could afford private clubs. But times change, and many in Brookline have long since wanted to see a community pool made available to everyone. In 1951, State Senator Philip Bowker attended the opening of Cambridge's magazine Beach Pool. He noted in a Brookline Chronicle column, when we still had a newspaper, that pools at Charlesbank, Watertown, Waltham, and Brighton are now ready for use. And that quote, "My hope is that someday we will wake up in Brookline and have at least one outdoor pool," end of quote. Next slide. More recently, Brookline carried out a needs assessment in 2001, which found that more than 50% of residents think the town needs an outdoor pool. This was followed by the comprehensive plan as 2005 to 2015.
Ms.
Still the most
Jonas, I
recent
have to give
plan.
you the 1-minute warning for planning purposes.
You're kidding.
I'm sorry.
Wow,
That's
did
why
we
I'm giving,
lose?
that's why I'm giving you the 1-minute warning for planning purposes.
Aye. Well, 2005 to 2015 comprehensive plan informed the Recreation Department that they had to provide a feasibility study for an outdoor pool. The 2005-2006 action plan reiterated the need to do a feasibility study. In 2019, town meeting voted almost unanimously for a siting study, serving as preparatory for a more comprehensive study of feasibility. In 2020, a siting study working group reviewed site plans options. Also part of that siting study, next slide, we reviewed the objectives and the scope of the feasibility study to be carried out. Next slide. In 2006, Brookline's Parks and Open Space and Recreation Department carried out a strategic asset master plan with an update in 2020. They discussed national standards for pools for municipalities. One was an absolute measure, the other
I
relative.
hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you got to
Wow.
sort of wrap this one up. And
This did not work.
I apologize.
Anyway,
I gave you a little flexibility because I knew there was a little bit of passing the baton dead time. So
yeah.
you can have another 25 seconds, but I really got to ask you to try to wrap
Okay.
up in that.
Okay. Under both absolute and relative measures, Brookline needed at least 2 outdoor pools to match comparable communities and an absolute basis. I think I'm just going to say here, the Belmont and Lexington pool directors told me they had record numbers of attendance at their outdoor pools this summer because of the many hot days. Please join the advisory committee, the planning board, and the Brookline Green Space Alliance in supporting warrant Article 40 at long last to provide our residents with this basic resource that almost all other communities provide their residents. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Lebovitz, I apologize for mispronouncing your last name earlier. I won't make that mistake again, or at least I'll try not to. Mr. Doggett. John Doggett. Oh.
Mute. Finally, thank you. If I'm muted, apologize. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Doggett, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 13, a member of the Advisory Committee, speaking for the Advisory Committee, which voted to recommend favorable action on warrant Article 40 as amended by the petitioners. This warrant article calls for the town to initiate a feasibility study for a net zero emissions outdoor community swimming facility under the leadership of the Parks and Open Space or the Recreation Departments. The estimated $75,000 cost of such a feasibility study will have no impact on the town operating budget, as that it is to be paid from the Community Preservation Act account or capital improvement plan funds or potential funding sources such as the Recreation Department revolving fund. In terms of timing, feasibility study funds will be expected to be allocated in FY25, with the target completion date of the study being July 1st, 2026. In the spring of 2019, town meeting warrant Article 30 called for a preliminary study of options for locating a public outdoor swimming facility for Brookline residents. Subsequently, the Parks and Recreation Commission formed an outdoor pool working group, to examine a number of possible sites in town for test fits of a pool to those various sites. The Parks and Recreation Commission hoped to study the feasibility and potential siting of an outdoor pool as part of a comprehensive plan of multiple outdoor recreation needs for the town. Such a study, unfortunately, has yet to be funded. Brookline is underserved according to the national standards from the National Park and Recreation Association, in that the association's guidelines are for one swimming pool for every 20,000 residents. And in a survey that the petitioners did of 35 surrounding communities with populations greater than 30,000, they found that only Peabody and Brookline have no outdoor pools. In terms of economics, outdoor swimming complexes typically require a modest amount of capital to build, averaging around 6 to 12 million historically, and that the net operating revenue can be positive and self-sustaining. Examples of this are in FY22, Belmont's net revenue after operating expenses were recovered was about 200,000, as the petitioners have already remarked, and Lexington's net about plus $80,000. In the advisory committee discussion, concerns were expressed by members about the importance of finding an accessible location with adequate transportation, and also to optimize land use in the town to preserve true open park space. Capital scarcity and competition with other important projects were also concerns. Finally, that an outdoor swimming pool complex should really be considered in an overall outdoor recreation plan for the town rather than in isolation. On the plus side, however, advisory committee members were enthusiastic about the idea of an outdoor pool, particularly regarding the health, overall recreation, and the community benefits that such a facility would offer. This sentiment was mirrored by many positive and no negative public comments received by the committee.
Got 10
This
seconds,
was a
Mr. Doggett.
Coming right up. There is a
you.
significant support in the committee for a feasibility study, as the outdoor swimming pool facility would be a highly valuable addition to Brookline's recreation offerings. It is likely in our now hotter summers to be very popular and potentially financially self-sustaining. The advisory committee recommends favorable action on warrant Article 40 as amended by the petitioners by a vote of 15 in favor, 4 against, and 4 abstentions. Thank you.
There's been a motion to call the question, and although I am highly sympathetic to this, as so far there are no speakers signed up in opposition, there are some folks who have questions that I think should be heard, and I want to recognize one more speaker, and then we'll go to questions, after which, unless the playing field changes dramatically, I suspect that a motion to call the question would probably be allowed. We'll see how it plays out. Ms. Bernard, Laura Bernard.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Lauren Bernard, Commissioner of Park and Recreation, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Commission. During a meeting on Wednesday, October 12th, 2022, the Park and Recreation Commission took a vote to abstain from voting on Warrant Article 40. The motion read as follows, and I quote, that the Park and Recreation Commission abstain from a vote on Warrant Article 40, a study for an outdoor pool, because of a lack of funding source and other needed assets, end quote. I want to preface my remarks just by saying that we did not take a vote on the article itself, but simply there was a motion on voting to abstain. As we all know, there are competing interests for numerous and necessary recreational facilities, as well as a need to identify funding for multiple feasibility studies. As such, the majority of the Commission voiced a preference to refocus these efforts as a whole. Specifically, the majority wished for a better understanding of potential sites and estimates for the totality of feasibility studies of the various recreational needs in town, including but not limited to the following facilities: an outdoor pool, an indoor skating rink, playing fields, a recreation center that potentially could group a number of these onto one site, and notably how these facilities might either be combined and or considered within the context of each other. In contrast, the minority of the Commission felt that enough information had been gathered and discussed by the Park and Recreation Commission in previous years, most notably during the outdoor working pool group in 2020 that was recently cited by the petitioners in their remarks, and that it was within the ability of the commission to take a vote on warrant Article 40 rather than abstain. The minority did not feel as though more specific information, like a proposed budget or a predetermined location, needed to be incorporated into the warrant Article 40 in order to vote either in favor or against the article, which asks only for a study. In conclusion, the commission voted 4-1 in favor of abstention on warrant Article 40. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to move to some questions. Ms. Goldsmith, you have a question.
Hi there, Jennifer Goldsmith, Precinct 11. Hope everyone is well tonight. My question has to do with the slide that Ms. Jonas shared that makes it appear that for like decades, it seems, there's been an interest in pursuing the outdoor pool, and that maybe this has gone through Parks and Rec several times. I know Ms. Bernard just spoke, but it feels like, and I've heard, I was in some of, because of my own warrant article, in a number of the committee meetings that Ms. Jonas was in, and it sounded to me like there was maybe leapfrogging, like we've done everything as a town meeting, every work group has done everything possible to move this forward, and yet it seems like it's been detoured or derailed numerous times, possibly by the Parks and Rec Commission. So my question is really for Ms. Jonas, if she could expand a little on what was the, like, how did this go off track? Like, why are we back here again? And how did this isn't a question for you, Ms. Jonas, but like, how did an ice skating rink leapfrog over a pool that we voted on, what, like 5 times to move forward by discussion? And is it, even if we vote on this tonight, is it possible that Parks and Rec can again derail this? I'm just mystified by how it continues to be derailed. And I promise you, regardless how the vote is, I will not give the finger to anyone on screen, just as no one should.
Okay, Ms. Goldsmith, I think we've got it. I think rather than have Ms. Goldsmith address that, I would instead call on either Ms. Galantine or Ms. Vecchio from Parks and Open Space, who may be able to shed some light on that. And if not, then we'll take it from there. So either Aaron Shute Galantine or Alexandra Vecchio, can you shed us any light into how the process played out or didn't?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Alexandra Vecchio. I'm the Director of Parks and Open Space for the town of Brookline. I will say that I wasn't on staff at the time that the outdoor pool working group did their work. So I'm speaking based off of meeting minutes and history that I've gathered since taking the role. But the working group looked at an outdoor pool, and there was simultaneously a working group that was formed to look at the needs for ice skating in Brookline, given the decline of the current outdoor ice rink. With that being said, the ice rink started to experience some severe mechanical failures and required a significant amount of investment in order for it to remain functional. And so that was voted and approved. And with that, the ice rink task force moved forward in trying to come up with a long-term solution. Currently, we have temporary refrigeration units at the ice rink. But the outdoor pool feasibility study was conducted with different site options, and those fit tests were the results of that preliminary work. So the ice rink really moved forward out of necessity because that resource faced significant failure.
Okay. Thank you. We have Ms. Goodwin, you have a question.
Yes, hi, thank you very much. I'm Carolyn Goodwin with Precinct 8. And I just had a question. I don't know if it's for the advisory committee or from the petitioners, but
Well, I get the good job of trying to figure out who to send
excellent,
it to.
thank
So
you.
let's
'Cause
find
I
out
don't
what
know
the
that-
question is, and then we'll figure out who might be able to answer it for you.
Perfect. I'm reading that, and I've heard that the feasibility study is to be paid from Community Preservation Act or Capital Improvement Plan, or perhaps the Recreation Department revolving retained funds. So I'm wondering what, if any, are competing needs for these funds, and what are there other needs that won't be funded if this is funded, or what other plans and ideas are competing for these specific funds?
Oh, what's that? Oh. I'm advised that Lincoln Heineman would be the appropriate person for that question. Mr. Heineman?
Evening. Lincoln Heineman, the town's finance director. So certainly, you know, the town's at the beginning of the process with the Community Preservation Act. So, you know, I don't have the information at my fingertips now to say, you know, what other applications might be out there or what might be coming with respect to the Community Preservation Act. Does that help to answer the question?
Well, perhaps. Let's also see, perhaps Melissa Goff could also shed some light on that. Ms. Goff, do you think you could help us out of the woods?
Sure. Good evening, Melissa Goff, Deputy Town Administrator. The CIP is extremely compressed, and some of the other competing needs are underfunded roadway maintenance, some underfunded building maintenance, and then also utilization of the Newberry site once a purpose is determined for the use of that site.
Thank you. Ms. Schatz, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Lisa Schatz, Precinct 11. I'm wondering why an outdoor pond isn't being considered as well, which might be more eco-friendly. Thank you.
You said an outdoor pond? Okay. I think that one probably might be appropriately addressed to Ms. Jonas or one of the other petitioners. Ms. Jonas, you want to take a crack at that, or give us one of your designees?
Well, sure. I mean, we don't have a pond currently. The Aaron Shute Galentine did a great design for the reservoir, which even fit in beach volleyball. But that is part of a feasibility study. And I do have to correct Ms. Del Vecchio that we did not have a feasibility study for a pool. We had a siting study, which was preliminary to a feasibility study.
Okay, I'm letting you overstep a little bit, but fair enough. Thank you, Ms. Jonas. I'm going to take, we have some more questions left, but I'm going to take a comment from Mr. Hebert, and I hope I pronounced your name right, John Hebert. If I didn't, I apologize. Tell me how you do it, and I will get it right next time. But he actually has a comment against it, and since we have no speakers who are signed up to speak against it, I would like to hear from him now.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Assistant Moderator. John Hebert, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. In looking at the rationale to conduct the feasibility study, and it seems, well, it seems like an innocuous thing, but I think if we take a look at the data that this is based on, we're talking about 2001 needs assessments, 2005 through 15 comprehensive plan. There's got to be a reason why, despite the fact that there was interest in this even long ago and perhaps continuing, that nothing was done. And perhaps one of the reasons why, when you look at the other towns, well, the other towns have something that Brookline doesn't have, and that's called open space. The cost analyses that have been discussed, I believe, are only talking about operating expenses. They're not talking about the initial capital outlay of developing the project. Now, I do not know that for a fact, so I could be easily corrected on that, but we're looking at a time when the town is budget strapped, and we're looking at other projects that have cost $6 to $12 million historically. So in today's dollars, you could expect them to be more. The most current data that's presented in this talks about how 48%, I believe it is, of people who responded to the survey in the master plan from 2020 it put the outdoor pool at a pretty high level, but in fact, 32% of the people in that very survey said that an outdoor pool was either not very important, and 18% of that 32% said it was not at all important. So there's a bit of cherry picking going on with that data. So I'm just concerned that if we're going to go down the road and do a feasibility study on something, that we're already assuming that there is justification to do that study. And once that project takes on momentum, my concern is that it might take on a life of its own. So I just want to throw those cautions out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take a couple more questions. Mr. Nangle, you had a question? Mr. Nangle?
Yes, I do. Sorry about the light. My question is,
okay,
the last
who you are.
Last time this went through,
Mr.
years
Nangle,
ago,
tell us who you
we
are.
ended up seeing a
Mr.
site
Nangle,
review that
Mr.
only
Nangle, Mr.
considered green
Sandy
spaces
Gadsby
in
will come
town.
up here and yank me off the
I
podium
think that's
if I
why it
don't make
failed
you tell us
ultimately.
who you are.
So whoever would be,
Okay, Mr. Nangle, with the utmost respect,
can you hear me
I
now?
have to ask you to tell us, we need to know who you are and what precinct you're from.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm not sure I'm being heard.
Can you hear me?
What am I doing?
Okay, Mr. Nangle,
Okay.
we're going to come back. We're going to
Thank-
come back to you if you can't hear us.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, you need
All
to
right,
tell
I'm
us who
sorry
you
about that.
are and where you're from.
Yes, from the dark. Richard Nangle, Town Meeting, Precinct 15.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry about that.
No, it's
The
all right.
last time this went through, it ended up being a site study that only considered green space. And I believe ultimately that's why it fell by the wayside and we're back here again. Now, it is only a resolution, which means it's meaningless. It's a request, not a requirement. of the
Okay, Mr.
town
Nangle,
board.
is there a question inside
Yes.
your preface?
Okay.
Okay.
Would somebody be willing to state whether we could look outside of green space and look at other spaces that could be tied into economic development?
Okay, I'm not quite sure I understand that question. Could you clarify that a little bit for us, Mr. Nangle?
Can we look at possible redevelopment sites, possibly Newbury College, possibly Cleveland Circle, other places where it would make more sense to put a swimming pool, places also where there'd be accessibility.
Okay, I think I understand that. Ms. Vecchio, can you help us with that?
Good evening, Alexander Vecchio, Director of Parks and Open Space for the town of Brookline. So I don't think that I can answer that question. I think that's probably a question for economic development. But I
Okay.
guess I can say that in my time here, when we've been looking for land to do lots of different things, we have come up short on the private side, but I will turn that to economic development and planning.
Ms. Bruton, are you here? Can you shed any light as to whether there are some sites that we might be able to look at?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. So this is Kara Bruton, Director of Planning and Community Development. And if I understand Mr. Nagel's question, it's whether different town departments could work collaboratively in looking at sites beyond those that are owned by the town, perhaps including privately owned sites and especially sites that are in our commercial areas. And I don't know of any reason why that couldn't be an option.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bruton. Mr. Gray, you have, okay, we have another motion to call the question. I am not going to take it quite yet. Mr. Gray, do you have a question? You do have a question, Mr. Gray.
Yes, I do. Jeff Gray, town meeting member from Precinct 10, chair of the Zero Emissions Advisory Board and principal at Zero Carbon MA. First, my disclosures. I absolutely hate fun. And I have a sneaking suspicion that the ulterior motive on this article is fun. And I would like to ask the petitioners if that's truly the case.
I'm going to take your question as rhetorical, Mr. Gray. So we'll move on. I think on that note, since I've seen 4 motions to call the question, I will take a motion at this stage to call the question. And since 4 people have made the motion, the first of them being Ms. Gilman, I will assume we have a second by one of the other 3 people. Ms. Ashkenazi was next in line. So the list of speakers are signed up to speak, all in favor of the warrant article, are Mr. Bors, Mr. Hyken, Ms. Zimmerman, Harrington, Ann Rogel, who is a town resident, Mr. Gordon, Ms. Cavallero, who is also a town resident, Ms. Scanlon, actually you already spoke to us, Ms. Linos, Ms. Toomey, Mr. Homer, Ms. Newifind, Mr. Penzel, Mr. Swartz, Richard Robinson, a town resident, and Ms. Roseman. Queued up to ask questions are Mr. Koltoff, Ms. Friedman, and Mr. Tuckman was in line and had a comment in favor of the warrant article. So we'll take a motion to call the question. It requires, of course, a 2/3 vote.
Okay, 210 yes, 22 no, 9 abstentions.
Okay. Motion passes with 210 yes, 22 no, and 9 abstentions, which brings us to a vote on the main motion found again on pages 40-14 through 40-19 of the combined reports, a resolution seeking to have the town conduct a feasibility study for an outdoor swimming pool. It requires a majority vote, and drop the screen.
Right. 213 yes, 24 no, 6 abstentions.
The motion carries with a vote of 213 yes, 24 noes, and 6 abstentions. That will turn us to the next warrant article, and I will surrender the podium.
All right, folks, we are back with the last article of town meeting. So I know some of you are jumping up and down, and I am doing so in my mind. Anyway, this has to do with Article 41, which is a resolution urging the Brookline Housing Advisory Board to create an affordable housing overlay district subcommittee to study and make a report about whether or not such an overlay district is appropriate. It is moved by Ms. Richardson, seconded by Mr. Pollock. The main motion appears on supplement 2, pages 1 through 5, on the night 5 supplement. There's actually an amendment that was made by the advisory committee, which was sort of buried in the combined reports, and I apologize for not making that clearer. The AC recommendation is found at supplement 1, pages 6 through 9 in the combined reports. And the difference, and we will be voting on these, is that the AC amendment deleted a whereas clause that was in the petitioner's motion, which said that exclusionary zoning disproportionately affected buyers and renters of color in Brookline. But we will now go to a discussion of the motion itself. Oh, I apologize. The amendment, the amended version moved by Mr. Doughty, seconded by Mr. Pollock. And the speakers, first, we are hearing from some Brookline High students, Alice Thompson, Atlas Nubier, and Tal Canetti, who have 5 minutes. And welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Atlas Nubier, and I'm one of the petitioners for warrant Article 41. I'm also a senior at Brookline High School.
I'm Tal. I'm also a senior at Brookline High School, and we are also all leaders of the Climate Justice Club. Alice is trying to unmute, but for now I'll start. Unless Alice, next slide, please. Wait, Alice, can you talk now? No. Okay. So the big question is why? Why do we care about affordable housing, and why did we write this warrant article? And really the short answer is that Brookline needs more affordable housing. There is a really strong demand, but the supply is not meeting it. Next slide, please. Some quick statistics is that the average waiting time for a family to get a Brookline Housing Authority property is about 6 years, and there are about 7,700 of these households/families. And then in all of Brookline, there are only about 2,125 affordable units that are currently available, at least as of June 2022. And really, we've seen this negatively affect our friends, our classmates, our teachers, and the strengths of the Brookline community as a whole. So it's a big problem. Next slide, please.
So what is an affordable housing overlay? Essentially, an affordable housing overlay district, or an HOD, allows developers to bypass zoning requirements if they build permanently 100% affordable units that meet certain criteria. The zoning restrictions that could be bypassed and criteria could be developed by the study committee and be neighborhood specific in order to tailor the affordable housing overlay district for a community. Criteria that would allow developers to bypass zoning restrictions includes income targeted housing that meets different income tiers. This is a core tenet of the affordable housing overlays. For example, what it could look like is having fractions be restricted for different income levels. Next slide, please. Many greater Boston communities, including Cambridge, Somerville, and North Reading, have implemented AHODs where they have proven to increase affordable housing. One example of success is Cambridge. In the first year after passing its own AHOD, Cambridge has approved 350 new affordable units and homes in its AHOD pipeline. Based on this success, we believe that it would be worthwhile for Brookline to investigate whether or not an affordable housing overlay would be a good idea for us to pursue and what it might look like. Next slide, please. Is Alice able to speak?
She's not.
Oh, hello. Sorry about that. It just asked me to unmute. Hi, I'm Alice. I'm also a senior at BHS. Nice to be here. Sorry about that little mishap. So I just want to emphasize that our goal with this proposal is more income targeted affordable housing that is explicitly reserved for low to middle income residents. We think that an AHOD could be a useful tool to increase this type of housing in Brookline. So we're asking for a study committee to investigate whether or not an AHOD would be appropriate for Brookline and what could that look like? Next slide, please. All right, so some specifics around this. We're proposing a study committee under the wing of the Housing Advisory Board. You can read the specifics of the committee makeup on this slide. I just want to highlight that there will be at least 2 members who have lived in affordable or public housing, and at least 1 member designated by the Director of the Council on Aging in order to represent the needs of seniors and those who are mobility limited. Next slide, please. Oh, I think Tall needs to be unmuted.
Okay, sorry about that. So just quickly, endorsements. Every entity on this slide has endorsed at least one of our versions, most notably the Select Board, the Planning Board, the Advisory Committee, etc. As well as we have a wide array of citizen organizations like Brookline for Everyone, Brookline Equity Coalition, and even Brookline by Design. At least each of these has at least one of our versions, not necessarily both, but yeah.
Next slide, please. Awesome. So there's only one difference between the main motion and the advisory committee motion of our article, a whereas clause that says, whereas exclusionary zoning disproportionately harms buyers and renters of color. The advisory committee removed this whereas from our original article, but we felt it was important to keep it. Next slide, please. So the rule of whereas clauses is that they should be both factual and relevant to the warrant article. This is a factually true statement. It should not be controversial. Both historical patterns and current data show us that exclusionary zoning disproportionately harms buyers and renters of color. All the experts agree with this. The White House itself backs this up in a 2021 report saying, research has connected exclusionary zoning to racial segregation, creating greater disparities in measurable outcomes. This is also relevant. Talking about racism and exclusionary zoning is undoubtedly relevant to conversations about zoning and to this proposal. As high school students, it's really important for us to see that town leadership is having conversations about racism and crafting anti-racist policy. Not only is this whereas clause factual and relevant, it is really important. Atlas, Tall, and I ask you to please vote for our main motion of this warrant article.
Thank you. Is that the end of your presentation? No. Okay. You've got about a minute and a half left.
Sorry, we have some more slides. Sorry, I meant to say next slide after that. Sorry. Next slide, please.
So just one last slide, but here are some final notes we wanted to leave everyone with. First of all, the HAB has agreed to take this under their wing, minimizing the burden that would be placed on town staff, especially the planning department. And additionally, our resolution will complement the housing production plan and the comp plan. The HPP will very likely recommend looking into an AHOD, and our proposal will be queued up and ready to be incorporated into a master plan when the time comes. It is a unique and possibly very effective idea that deserves its own study committee. Next slide. Thank you so much, everyone. And we hope you vote yes on the main motion of Article 41.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. Mr. Pollack, you are up next. And you have 6 minutes.
Thank you. David Pollack, Precinct 11, speaking for the Advisory Committee in favor of Warrant Article 41. This is a resolution urging the Brookline Housing Advisory Board, the HAB, to create an Affordable Housing Overlay District, or AHOD, study subcommittee composed of a mix of HAB members and non-members. AHODs are zoning overlays that typically offer incentives such as density bonuses and expedited or by right permitting in return for increases in affordability. It's a tool to encourage affordable housing development in the specific places and patterns where a municipality wishes this type of development to occur. AHODs can apply to limited geographic areas or the whole town, and they can have different incentives for different areas or types of projects. They've been implemented in North Reading in 2008 and Cambridge and Somerville in 2020. This resolution asks for study of projects that would be permanently 100% affordable at a range of income levels from below 30% up to 120% of AMI, area median income. The idea that the HAB should take this on came from Planning and Community Development Director Cara Bruton, and the HAB has agreed to this assignment. It fits with the HAB's mission, which reads, quote, "The Housing Advisory Board promotes the preservation and creation of housing, which is affordable to low, moderate, and upper moderate income households. With this goal, it studies and provides guidance to town staff and boards regarding Brookline's housing needs, policies, programs, and zoning tools," end quote. This resolution has seen significant collaborative revision along the way. Oversight responsibility was changed from the Select Board to the HAB. A report date was removed completely to provide flexibility to the HAB, the Planning Department, and for integration of this study with other aspects of the town's planning framework. Committee composition was changed, adding, quote, "a mix of HAB members and non-members," and, quote, "at least one member designated by the Director of the Council on Aging," and also incorporating the advice of Town Council relating to diversity. The focus of the subcommittee report was narrowed to just, quote, "the potential relevance, requirements, and effectiveness of an AHOD," and many changes were made to the whereas clauses. The advisory committee discussed the following questions. Should this be a separate study rather than part of the town-wide comprehensive plan? There was opposition to adding additional independent studies, saying that we need to do much more holistic planning. In favor, it was noted that this is a highly technical zoning tool, that the HAB is well suited to do a deep dive and report back, and that its report can then be incorporated into the larger plan. Are 100% subsidized housing buildings the right model for Brookline? There's concern about building 100% subsidized housing and an interest in mixed income buildings with significant affordability, such as 50%. This concern is more related to family housing, as there are many affordable senior housing buildings in Brookline that are 100%, and that model works well with integrated support services for seniors. In favor, it was pointed out that there aren't any state or federal subsidy programs for mixed income developments above 25%, other than 100%. So while we might prefer something in between, we should focus on the possible. Is the added density and change to our built environment right for Brookline? Big buildings, loss of streetscape, impact on other resources like transit and parks, and competition for scarce parking if minimums were lowered or eliminated were all cited as concerns. What will this cost? And should we be paying for it? Regional job growth and the associated demand for housing is being generated in Cambridge, Boston, and other nearby communities that all benefit from the commercial taxes collected from that growth. Should we be responsible for building the housing to meet that need? 100% affordable family housing adds school-age population, and the associated new tax revenue is unlikely to cover the associated cost of town services. And is this even possible, given high land values and limited space? Brookline is built out and lacks economic opportunity zones or brownfield sites such as Kendall Square, Assembly Square, Boston Seaport. Affordable Housing Trust and CPA funds in Brookline are limited. Can this even work? However, it was pointed out by the same speakers on the AC that this is what the study will investigate and report on. The petitioner's version restores a whereas clause or has a whereas clause that the advisory committee deleted. Whereas exclusionary zoning disproportionately harms buyers and renters of color. The AC discussed this specifically when it met on November 3rd. The advisory committee often scrutinizes such whereas clauses because in its opinion, such clauses reflect statements of fact and must therefore be well sourced. Advisory committee members pointed out that while it is strictly true that people of color were excluded in Brookline and across America, making the whereas clause literally true, it is somewhat misleading in that it is well documented that exclusionary covenants existed in Brookline which prohibited sales and rentals to Jewish, Irish, and Chinese people in addition to people of color. In addition, it was noted that the whereas clause is not particularly closely tied to the content and spirit of the resolution. The advisory committee declined to restore the whereas clause by a vote of 3 in favor, 19 opposed, with 1 abstention. The advisory committee recommends favorable action on warrant Article 41 as amended by the advisory committee by a vote of 12 in favor, 6 opposed, and 5 abstentions.
Thank you very much. We will now hear from Mr. Klein, I believe, of the HAB.
Thank you. Jonathan Klein. I'm a member of the Housing Advisory Board and I speak on their behalf tonight. I'm also a member of the Planning Study Committee, which was created by Article 26 at a former town meeting. And I am a member of the board of Brookline for Everyone. And as many of you know, a strong affordable housing proponent. I speak strongly in favor of warrant Article 41 on behalf of the HAB and also on behalf of myself. I think this is and I want to start by complimenting and thanking Atlas, Tal, and Alice for bringing this forward, for going through the gauntlet of hearings, that is necessary to bring something to town meeting. I think they have done just a delightful job, and I appreciate their political acumen in working with all of our town boards and committees and making compromises and changes to their warrant article to bring what we have in front of us today, and that has been widely endorsed by many, many town bodies, including the HAB, which endorsed it unanimously. I know I'm one of the last people between you all and adjournment, so I'm going to try and be very brief and not use all of my time. But I want to say one thing. One of the really significant concerns, we're now in a post-40B environment because we've met our 40B 10%, and 40B will no longer be a driver of affordable housing development in Brookline. Some people think that's good. Some people think that's bad. I'm not going to comment on that one way or the other. But one of the complaints about 40B is that we got a lot of housing density without getting a lot of affordability, because 40B only required 25% affordability. And one of the things about this affordable housing overlay district is it says, let's create some incentives, some zoning incentives to create affordable housing that will be 100% affordable at different levels for very low income, moderate income, even middle income people, right? With a lot of nuance, but that is all affordable. And I think that's really one of the outstanding things about the idea of an affordable housing overlay district. I want to address one more thing, the question about that David raised and that the AC raised about should Brookline be responsible for providing housing for the job growth that is occurring in Boston and Cambridge and other places. And I want to ask town meeting, to think expansively here. We are not just Brookline. We are Brookline, we are Boston, we are Cambridge, we are the metro area, we are Massachusetts. We are part of a larger society, and we need to be part of that society. We have a real affordable housing challenge, a real affordable housing crisis. We all know that. That's, we don't even need to look at numbers to know what's going on. And the idea that we can create some incentives that will provide more affordable housing here in Brookline, I think is a really excellent idea. I'm excited about being on I've met my 3 minutes. I'm excited about being on the HAB and having the opportunity to study this, and I urge you to vote favorably on warrant Article 41. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hyken, you are up. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. This is Steve Hyken speaking on behalf of the Planning Board, and I might add a fellow member of the Housing Advisory Board, along with Mr. Klein, who took many of the words out of my mouth. So I'll also try to be brief. The Planning Board unanimously supports warrant Article 41. As Mr. Klein said, I just want to reiterate, this is an especially important time to be looking at this now that the town has, on the one hand, it's great that the town has passed the 10% threshold, so we are not subject to 40B proposals over which we have very little zoning control. And as Mr. Klein said, only get 1/4 of the units that are truly affordable. And as a member of the HAB, we did take the step of offering to monitor and organize the study committee that would move this idea forward. The Planning Board met after the HAB had made this recommendation and was pleased that the HAB had offered to take a leadership role and supports the creation of a subcommittee of the HAB to work on the AHOD zoning. We also believe that the removal of a strict time limit will give a committee time to explore how this can best be implemented, study other communities that have done this, and report back to town meeting at the appropriate time. But this is something that can be done strategically and done sooner rather than later, and should not wait for the comprehensive planning effort to get rolling. So just to come back to where I started, the Planning Board voted unanimously to recommend favorable action on Article 41. We did not discuss the alternative version promoted by the Advisory Committee regarding one specific whereas, so I'm supposing that our recommendation really relates to the main motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ashkenazi.
Hello. Thank you. Warrant article, Miriam Ashkenazi speaking on behalf of the Select Board, who voted 4-1 favorable action for the petitioner's version of warrant Article 41. As you've heard, this warrant article is a resolution urging the Brookline Housing Advisory Board to create a charge an affordable housing overlay district study subcommittee. Our neighbors, Cambridge and Somerville, have both adopted affordable housing zoning overlay districts in 2022. This resolution is only asking that we study the idea of doing the same and make recommendations to the town based on the work of the committee. Last year, the town undertook a thorough assessment of Brookline constituents' priorities to help us determine the best ways to focus our American Rescue Plan Act monies, and affordable housing was at the top of the list. This resolution is timely, important, and speaks directly to our town's values, needs, and desires. The Select Board commended the petitioners for the inclusive and collaborative approach that they took with this warrant article and their willingness to learn and be flexible, resulting in a warrant article that has the full support of the Planning Board and the Housing Advisory Board and near unanimous support from the Select Board. You will also have in front of you this evening the AC version of this warrant article that does one thing differently. It strikes the whereas clause, and I'm going to quote it here because it has been misquoted a few times. Exclusionary zoning disproportionately harms buyers and renters of color, end quote. To be clear, exclusionary zoning is not the same thing as racial covenants, though they also played a role in the development of Brookline. The select board rejected the AC version because exclusionary zoning does, in fact, disproportionately harm buyers and renters of color. This is a statement of fact. It's not a value judgment. We all know how much I like data. So I direct you to the White House's own written materials on the subject, which the students themselves already pointed to. I'm going to quote from the comprehensive White House report. Quote, research has connected exclusionary zoning to racial segregation, creating greater disparities in measurable outcomes. These disparities are present today in many forms, end quote. The research cited, by the way, is easily located in the NIH archives or PubMed. If you want to find it yourself, the keywords are zoning and race. If you would like to read and learn more about this topic, I cannot recommend any more highly a book by a renowned legal scholar, Richard Rothstein, called The Color of Law. While it is a work of nonfiction, it is a riveting and important history we should all know and understand. Also, Brookline is mentioned in the book. Not exactly in a good way, but it is mentioned. Because exclusionary zoning disproportionately harms buyers and renters of color, and because affordable housing is an important issue for Brookline to address, the select board voted 4-1 favorable action for this warrant article. And I do want to do an extra little asterisk to really commend the students who worked on this. Thank you for all your hard work for the town.
Thank you. I'm going to take a couple of questions now. I will note that the speakers who have signed up previously are all speaking in favor. We have a couple of people who indicate they want to make comments, but I am first going to call on people who have questions. Mr. David Lowe.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I've missed a few prior opportunities, so nice to have this one late in the day. So first of all, I commend the students for an excellent presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you introduce yourself? I apologize.
I always forget that too. David Lowe, Precinct 11, town meeting member on the sunset of my career. I commend the students. They make us proud once again, Brookline High School students. And since it's late, I'll throw in a pun. I'm glad to see, I approve of the have and the have-nots getting together to form a committee for the have less. I would like to ask if the study can have a focus on keeping any affordable community properties affordable for the residents by keeping it net zero. That would provide a safety aspect as well. And poor people are also more prone to pollution problems generally, and this would help solve that problem. Perhaps we can associate the pool. I guess I'm asking if we can have an open mind in forming the study committee to consider these things. And I'd like to plant a seed that I would have liked to ask about the pool development. It applies.
But you can't ask about it.
No, I can't, but it applies here as well. And it's to plant a seed to look at networked geothermal that would offset. So if you need a heating load, say in a pool, you can combine
also
it.
Can't ask that. I'm not sure what your question actually
The question is whether the committee can go forward with these sorts of open-minded considerations. And I would throw into that lot public-private partnerships to find the siting as well. I'm planting a seed by way of a question. Is that possible in, we can't change the language, but I'd like to plant the seed for the committee that does form. Thank you.
Well, technically, the language of the article does circumscribe the nature of its task, but I will let Mr. Klein of the HAB respond to that. And Mr. Klein, if you do not feel comfortable, I will call on Ms. Bruton.
Yeah, I mean, the study is about zoning changes and potential changes to our zoning and permitting that would permit more development of 100% affordable housing developments. You know, those could be connected to things related to climate and, net zero and passive house and, those could all be part of that kind of study, but I don't see that that would apply to existing buildings or non-housing related buildings. So.
Thank you. Chi-Chi Wu, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Chi-Chi Wu, Precinct 7. Yeah, I had a question. In the advisory committee report explaining why they deleted the whereas clause, the statement was made that it is well documented that exclusionary covenants existed in Brookline, which prohibited sales and rentals to Jewish, Irish, and Chinese people, in addition to people of color. My question is, does the advisory committee realize that Chinese or Asians and Asians are people of color?
Okay, I'm going to take that as rhetorical, and we are going to, there's a motion to call the question by Mr. Margolis. Do we have a second? Do we have a second for the motion to call the question? Jerry Tuckman has seconded it. And so we will now hold a vote on whether or not to pass a resolution urging the Brookline Housing Advisory Board to, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, whether to terminate debate on the resolution. Oh, I didn't, well. Yeah. No. Thank you.
Yes, 41 no, 7 abstentions.
Okay, the motion passes. 183 yes, 41 no, 7 abstentions. Mr. Toffel has made a point of order, and I have a feeling I know what it is. But what is your point of order, Mr. Toffel?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mike Toffel, Precinct 8. Is it a preference or a requirement to read the names of the folks on the list and the questioners before terminating debate?
I think it is just practice and custom. It's not specified anywhere. It was on the chat monitor. I will list it now. However, given the balance of the vote, I think it is completely moot as to whether or not reading the names would have affected the outcome. Had it been a close vote, I might have reconsidered that. But the people who were ignored unjustly by having their name not mentioned as waiting in line include Mr. Toffel, Mr. Pollock, Mr. Levy, Ms. Frawley, Ms. Zimmerman, Mr. Lescoyer, Ms. Tamayo, Ms. Thal, and Mr. Ananian, all of whom previously signed up were in favor of the motion. So if you want to do research, Mr. Toffel, legislative as to whether or not it's a requirement, go for it. As far as I know, it's just practice. All right. I can't hear you. Oh, thank you. Ms. Frawley was going to speak against. However, we are now, technically we have to vote on the amendment before we move on the main motion. So the issue is whether or not to create an affordable housing overlay district subcommittee of the Housing Advisory Board to study and make a report as to whether or not to create an affordable housing overlay district. The only difference between the amendment And the main motion is that the amendment deleted a whereas clause saying that exclusionary zoning disproportionately affected and harmed buyers and renters of color. So we will first vote on that amendment, and then if that amendment fails, we will vote on the main motion, and the main motion will include that whereas clause. So we are now voting on the amendment. Yep. Okay, the motion fails. 79 yes, 138 no, and 14 abstentions. Since we finished that particular vote, I do not know the protocol, but apparently Mr. Green has a point of order, but I'll allow it because what the hell? Mr. Green.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to apologize for not being on camera. It was inadvertent when I spoke last. My point of order has to do with the fact that the recital that the advisory committee took out of the warrant article was actually very factual. But the question is it relevant? And this is a question to maybe Kara Bruton. Do we have exclusionary zoning in Brookline? And if so, why? And if so, why wasn't that mentioned in the recital?
Okay. Totally moot point at this part of the game. So thank you for your point of order. It is not recognized, and we're going to move on and take the main vote. So we are now voting on the main motion, which is the resolution urging the Brookline Housing Advisory Board to create an affordable housing overlay district.
Okay, 208 yes, 18 no, 9 abstentions.
Okay, the motion passes with 208 yes, 18 no, and 9 abstentions. That finalizes the substantive business of this fall town meeting. I am now going to yes, that's what I am now going to go through the changes in vote tallies, which I view as non-substantive, but okay. Starting with Article 1, the corrected votes, and from now on, I'm just going to give the vote totals. You can, Article 1, 246 yes, 0 no, 5 abstentions. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the special town meeting within the town meeting, so what we've called special town meeting 2. Article 1 of special town meeting 2 was 246 yes, 0 no, 5 abstentions. Staying with special town meeting 2, Article 3 was 241 yes, 4 no, 6 abstentions. Going to the main fall special town meeting, Article 3, 245 yes, 1 no, 3 abstentions. Article 4, 253 yes, 2 no, 2 abstentions. Article 5, on the motion to refer, 162 yes, 79 no, 11 abstentions. Article 6, main motion, 244 yes, 1 no, 4 abstentions. Article 7, main motion, 152 yes, 88 no, 7 abstentions. Article 10, main motion, 237 yes, 7 no, and 2 abstentions. Article 8, amendment, 130 yes, 99 no, 15 abstentions. Article 8, main motion, 219 yes, 8 no, 18 abstentions. The Article 9 amendment, 159 yes, 75 no, 15 abstentions. Article 9 main motion, 224 yes, 19 no, 8 abstentions. Article 14 main motion, 154 yes, 72 no, 21 abstentions. Article 23 main motion, 180 yes, 55 no, 13 abstentions. Article 25 main motion, 161 yes, 72 no, 8 abstentions. Article 15 main motion, 137 yes, 99 no, 77 abstain. Article 11 amendment, 184 yes, 59 no, 9 abstentions. Article 11 main motion, 172 yes, 77 no, 4 abstentions. Article 12 main motion, 187 yes, 61 no, 6 abstentions. Article 13 motion to refer, 78 yes, 159 no, 5 abstentions. Now we're jumping around out of numerical order. Article 39 main motion, 84 yes, 146 no, 15 abstentions. Article 26 main motion, 134 yes, 112 no, 7 abstentions. Article 2 main motion, 217 yes, 1 no, 2 abstentions. Article 28 main motion, 119 yes, 121 no, 8 abstentions. Article 29 main motion, 118 yes, 125 no, 8 abstentions. Article 31 motion to refer, 101 yes, 134 no, 6 abstentions. Article 31 main motion, 151 yes, 82 no, 10 abstentions. Article 33 main motion, 184 yes, 36 no, 18 abstentions. Article 34 main motion, 63 yes, 169 no, 8 abstentions. Article 35 main motion, 148 yes, 83 no, 9 abstentions. Article 36 main motion, 186 yes, 43 no, and 7 abstentions. As I will note in a minute, or I'll note now, you will have the opportunity between now and 5 o'clock tomorrow to let the clerk, Benjamin Kaufman, know if your vote has been incorrectly recorded. So now I will take a motion to dissolve this fall town meeting with the condition or notice that the meeting will not be officially dissolved until 5 o'clock p.m. tomorrow, December 9th. May I have a motion? Michael Burstein, thank you very much. And Susan Park seconds it. And lots of others. All right, let's take a vote on whether to dissolve this town meeting.
Yes. 3 no, 2 abstentions.
201 yes, 3 no, 2 abstentions. And the votes posted tomorrow will show who those 3 no votes are. But we are dissolved. I look forward to seeing you. No, we are technically dissolved until tomorrow night. Yeah, we're adjourned for now. We'll dissolve tomorrow night at 5. I look forward to seeing you all in person in May. Have great holidays. Yeah, also.